Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Hey, welcome back, Talent Growers. I am happy to present you with a great episode this week. This is my friend and colleague and a woman I admire, Laura Mendelow, and we have a fun and fast-paced conversation about a very complex concept that I really wanted to introduce you to. I actually invited her specifically to talk about this, even though it's not the only thing she talks about, because I think it's going to be so helpful for you. I loved learning about it from her. It's called Polarity Thinking, and it's not as complex as you think. You're totally going to get it. But I think it's going to give you new ways to think about old problems. So she talks about how to think more holistically and acknowledge complexity around many challenges that leaders have. She shares a really great example, a really good story, so that we can really understand what she means through the story of one of her clients that she worked with. She talks to us about this thing called a wisdom organizer, also known as a Polarity Map. And on the show notes page, you can grab a picture of that, because we do some mental gymnastics on this episode where we try to describe it with audio only. And when you see the full picture, of course, it helps it a lot. But you can get it. You'll totally get it. And it also will help make you smarter by thinking about it and trying. And in the end, I give Laura an idea using her own advice back to her. So I think that would be something that you might enjoy as well, how that came about. So I can't wait to hear what you thought about this episode. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist. Without further ado, here we go. Laura Mendelow on the TalentGrow Show. Hey there, welcome back to the TalentGrow Show. And I am excited to introduce to you a friend and a colleague, a mentor, a collaborator, Laura Mendelow. Laura is the owner, CEO, founder of the Mendelow Consulting Group, which is a leadership and team development company. And she is a coach, a facilitator, a trainer, and among many other things, also an expert in something called polarity thinking. And this is actually the reason why I asked Laura to come on the show today. I love the perspective that she brings to this, and I think that you're going to really love learning from her. Laura, welcome to the TalentGrow Show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I am really glad that you're here too. And before we get started, I want you to describe to the listeners your professional journey just briefly. Where did you get started and how did you get to where you are today?
Sure. So it's kind of funny. I've actually had a pretty straight and narrow path. And the way I introduce myself in training programs sometimes is I'll say, I'm a product of a mother who is a psychologist and a father who is an IT business entrepreneur. He started his own IT company in the 1970s where, computers at that time were the size of the first floor of an entire house.
Yes.
So he was very innovative and, had a great business mindset. And so I always say that I'm a product of my mother and father, and I created a path for myself, psychology in the workplace. And what I tell my kids often is that I help people get along at work. And so it really did, though, start when I was young. Even when I was nervous to talk to a teacher in elementary school, my mom would coach me on, how to be assertive, or she would make some meditation tapes for me, or, I didn't really know what it was at the time. I just knew it helped me relax and focus. So I've lived all of this throughout my childhood. And when I realized that there was a way to actually bring psychology into the workplace, and there's a field called organization development, I was so happy. It was just like, that is what I want to do. And so I started facilitating really early on, actually as a teenager, and facilitating groups, and I got real interested in group dynamics. That sort of led to background in, the outward bound type work where, you're singing Kumbaya, you're climbing in trees, trust falls, that sort of thing. When that was popular. Did some of that. And then I was like, there's got to be more to, working with people than just team building. And so that's when I got more serious and went more mainstream with organization development. And that's what I have my master's in. And then I joined a big consulting, one of the big consulting companies, and really focused more narrowly on leadership development and became certified as a leadership coach. And then decided in 2012 to start my own leadership and team development company.
Which is what you do now, right? And you work with a lot of different clients.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
And I guess a big piece of my story is my first child was born in 2004, and really grappling with some of those parenting techniques and trying to figure out how do we want to be as a family, and how do we manage a kid who, there was, high anxiety and, behaviors that were sort of off the chart at times. And I really started embracing leadership at home. And so that stuck with me for a long time as I worked on my relationship with my son, my oldest son, and as a family. I realized I was just actually developing myself as a leader, and that those skills then really leaked out into the workplace, and I became more effective leader in the workplace. So when I left the, more traditional working internally in a company, when I left, my vision was actually to really support leaders across all domains, which means helping people at work with their teams and, their careers in a workplace setting, and helping leaders at home. In other words, parents managing and creating like a meaningful family that they want to create.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed following your path, because I've known you for, I guess it turns out I've known you for many years, because I remember when you started developing these ideas and sharing them and changing your business to be more about the whole leader and thinking more holistically about people as leaders, both at home and at work. So it's been really interesting and fascinating. And I'm sure we're going to link to some of those kinds of resources in the show notes for people who are interested in learning more about that aspect. We're not going to drill into that today. Maybe we'll have another show where we can talk about the connection between being a leader and being a parent. That should be interesting. But I do want to talk to you more about polarity thinking. Now, I had come across polarity thinking previously, but I didn't really ever dig into it. And recently, you and I collaborated, as we have in the past. We each help each other with our businesses and our clients. And you did such a great workshop for one of my clients on polarity thinking. And I was like, I love the way you explain it, and you need to come on the show and explain it to me. First of all, because I want to learn more about it. Selfishly, I always love to share what I learn. So this is such a great medium for me to do that. This is one of the reasons why I have this podcast, is I get to learn and share at the same time. So Tell us, what is polarity thinking, and why is it important to leadership development?
Sure. So polarity thinking is really helping people navigate through complexity, with whatever that means for that person. So at the most basic level, when you talk about polarities, they're two interdependent pairs, or poles, as we describe them. So what do I mean by that? What do I mean by poles? What I mean by that is, a leader might be saying, how can I be honest and be empathetic towards people? How can I remain responsive to my clients and step back and be strategic? There's a lot of people that I work with, if their company is going through a hard time, they might say, Laura, how can I be honest with people of what's really happening and share some bad news with them, but also at the same time be hopeful for the future and inspire them towards, what the possibilities could be later on. So when polarities is basically these two poles, candor and diplomacy, responsive and strategic, margin and mission. So the list goes on and on. The importance to me is that often when people are forced with decisions or complexity, they feel the need to choose one side. And polarities really helps people see it more completely. It allows people to see a problem with the complexity in it and to hold both. So the outcome is that you're leveraging the upsides of both poles.
It's so interesting, because even before I came across the term, or maybe after, and I just didn't realize it was the same thing, I kept noticing that in my work too, where I felt like I needed to, that the leadership is so complex. This is what I do. I develop leaders, but often it's like we make contradictory asks of them, right? Like we tell them to be two opposite things at the same time. And that's really hard for us to do. So this theory, this concept is about helping people manage both. I'd love for you to help us understand, how can that be? Like, how can you be both things that seem to be opposites at the same time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say, well, let me give you an example of something that just recently came up. I was working with a client, and he took a long time to build his team. And the way he built his team was really to dig deep into focusing on people and caring for people. And he works within a large organization, and literally people are lined up wanting to join this guy's team.
Oh, yeah.
He's doing things such as, he told me there was a woman who unfortunately got into a car accident on his team, and she was in the hospital for many months. And once a week, he would stop at the hospital and just visit with her once a week on his way home. So, this guy, he went above and beyond. It's that kind of guy. He knew about everyone and everyone's name and their family and what people were doing and their hobbies. So because he had such a close connection to people, people gravitated towards him. They loved that about him, right?
Yeah.
So he was really, that was his identity. He was like the people manager. He was the people guy that everybody loved. And so when I started working with him, he was part of this high potential program, and he was being groomed to get promoted. And one of the things he was really scared about is that if he was promoted to the next level up, he wouldn't be able to spend that one-on-one time with his staff anymore. He wouldn't actually be able to show that he cares about them. And he was really concerned that people would see him as he's just climbing the ladder, or that he's really a fake, that now he's promoted and you don't care about me anymore. Like, you don't send me flowers anymore. But this was a real concern for him. He was struggling with this. On the one hand, he did want the promotion, definitely. And on the other hand, he just couldn't figure out how to make this work, where he could send the message that he cares for people, but also people wouldn't view him as distant and non-caring, And so what was actually happening is he was viewing the situation of caring for others, just the upside of caring for others. And he was looking at the downside of being promoted, or really working through his managers, like delegating things to his managers. That's really what the other side was about. If I delegated things to other people, I become more and more distant to my staff, right? So this tension for him was, how do I show that I care for others and work through others, scale up, because I can't do it all myself.
Yeah.
And so what we talked through together is, what were some of the downsides of caring for others? And he really recognized, I'm burned out. Like, by the time I get home, I barely have time for my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I am, just really, it's so time intensive to meet with people individually, one-on-one. So he was feeling really burned out himself. So we talked about, how do you then scale so that you can still be seen as someone who cares about people, but it doesn't necessarily have to be you doing all of the work all of the time, or you connecting with people all of the time. And what he actually came up with were things like, I don't think I ever expressed that to my managers, that this is really important to me about our team's culture, is that we take care of each other. So one of the things he realized is he never made that explicit. That was just all on him. He took that upon himself to be that person. And what he realized, in order to scale, if he's looking for that promotion, and probably even if he's not getting promoted, it's just healthier to have a culture where everybody's operating in a way where they're caring for each other. And so that was one of the things he did. He also would train people on how to have one-on-one conversations that were more meaningful, rather than let's just do a checklist on, what'd you get done today? What are you doing tomorrow, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So he was really training them to ask more thoughtful questions to really get to know the person that he felt was so important to him. So that's one way to show how you can do both. So he doesn't necessarily have to always be the person caring for others, but he can train others and he can create a culture that then helps others feel that they're still connected.
Yeah, I love it. And it's almost like he's focusing on the end result that he's seeking, which is people feel like people care about them at work, like their managers care about them.
Right.
But, he's involving more people so that he doesn't have to do it all himself. I mean, it's just such a smart solution.
And, the other things is that there was a lot of fears, that he had about being distant or a fake. And some of that just comes from not communicating what's happening. And so what he realized is he needed to also have not just conversations with his managers, but staff who were used to his time to say, look, I have other demands and I'm going to need to be more strategic. And my attention is going to be on some other things that it might look differently to you. It doesn't mean I don't care. And my door is always open for you. But I wanted you to know our relationship is going to change based on, the new roles and responsibilities. And your role is going to change too, because I'm going to rely on you more as well. So, it was also just bringing out some of the fears that he was experiencing and having a conversation about that with others.
Yeah. So using authenticity and vulnerability.
Right.
To actually create more trust in something that he worried would hinder trust.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. That's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. And good for him. He sounds like I totally get why the people would be banging at his door to try to get on his team. Unfortunately, exactly. It's rare and it shouldn't be, but you and I are trying to change that in the world. So,
right.
Hopefully
it will become and less. The male, right? Kudos for the males to really invest in people. I mean, he's really a special manager that definitely understands the benefit when you really invest in your people.
Yeah, I love it. So let's talk a little bit now. This is where polarity thinking, and we're going to include we'll include some background information or links or something in the show notes so people can see it. But you and I were talking a little bit before the show about how it's kind of hard to explain it without having the visual along because it is such a visual model. And there's this sort of picture that goes along with it. But I'd love if you could just try to describe it. This is kind of like one of those team building exercises when one person tries to describe the triangle and the other person tries to draw it. All right, Laura. So we're turning the tables on you.
I got it. Yeah, you said back to back, right?
Yes.
I know exactly. That's funny. So I think the difference between polarities and other people might have heard things like dilemmas or creative tensions, or there's other words that you hear floating around. Mm-hmm. Polarities really it differentiates itself because there is this, what we call a polarity map. There's a visual, and other people call it a wisdom organizer. And all that means is that you can take a complex situation and then map it out in this polarity map. Then it helps you make sense. You see a more complete picture and it helps you make sense of the dynamics going on and everything that's happening. So there is a component just like dilemmas or tensions where you talk about, instead of either or thinking, you use and thinking. Mm-hmm. Polarities would say it's a supplement to either or thinking, that either or is also valid for certain situations. And there's a time also where, especially with more complex situations, you use and. So the way we map it out, if you could imagine a 2x2 grid, all right? So you have 4 quadrants basically, right? And if you look at the horizontal line, you would have 2 oval. You would have an oval on the left-hand side and the oval on the right-hand side.
Kind of like a number 8 sideways?
So that's the infinity loop that you're talking about. Yes. Exactly. So then there would be an infinity loop around those 2 poles. So you have a pole on the left-hand side that's in the middle, of the quadrants. So there's a upper left-hand quadrant and a lower left-hand quadrant. There's like the pole is actually right in the middle there. And then on the right-hand side, the same thing. You have like another little oval where it's the second pole. So if we did candor and diplomacy, candor would be on the left-hand side and diplomacy would be on the right-hand side. So they both poles have they both have upper quadrants, which we call the upsides, and they both have lower quadrants, which we'll call the downsides. And then what you're describing, if you picture, like a number 8 on its side, we call that the infinity loop. And this infinity loop goes around these ovals, the poles. They go around the poles. So you go into the upside of candor, and then it takes you down in the figure 8 into the downside of candor. And then the natural flow is to go to the upside of diplomacy, and then you go to the downside of diplomacy, which then takes you back to the upside of candor. So there's a natural flow through this energy, like in this infinity loop. And then the piece that is bringing them all together is there's this spiral that's connecting the upsides of both towards a greater purpose. So what is my greater purpose of, for example, focusing on margin and mission? For the purpose of what? Well, the purpose of organizational success. Like I don't think I could have organizational success if I don't have bottom line numbers and my employees are happy. And so we're focused on our mission. And so there's the spiral that connects the two going upwards. And unfortunately, there's a spiral going downward too. So you could just be in this vicious cycle of only tapping into the downsides of both. And there's a vicious cycle going down.
Interesting. So let me test my understanding. So if we went back to, I guess your example with the manager, I guess like the spiral up towards the purpose would be for people to feel connected and be engaged at work, right? And love coming to work. And so his tension between becoming a leader of a higher level and being more strategically involved, and furthering his reach and his impact, and drawing on the upside of that, and also drawing on the upside of his interest in really knowing each person and having each person feel like they are cared about.
Right.
Okay.
And the greater purpose could be creating a culture of support and productivity.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that's what he achieves by both.
Yeah.
If he only focused on caring for others, he would burn himself out and probably not be that productive.
Yeah. So we don't have a lot of time, but let's quickly think about, okay, let's just imagine we have the map. Hopefully people didn't totally get confused when they're thinking about this, especially if they're driving. Don't be trying to draw it out while you're driving. Do it later. But let's imagine that we're holding that vision in our mind, and we've got the ovals and the polarity and the infinity loop and the upward spiral and the downward spiral. Woo! But so what are you doing with that? Like, how do you help people hold all of that at the same time? Because it sounds intense.
Yeah, it is. It is intense. And there's a lot to it. There's a lot of depth to it. It seems, on the surface level, it seems, oh, okay, you want me to do both. I should, consider both sides of a situation, or I should behave in a way that, I'm tapping into two areas of strength. It seems simple, but what the Polarity Map does is it allows you, and the way I use it personally, is it allows you to have a picture in your mind to know at any given point in time, am I on the upside of one side or the other? Am I really leveraging both? Or have I gone to the downside of one or the other? Where am I? And then this pathway that I call it the path to recovery. So what I find so powerful about this is often, when we do make mistakes or when we get stuck, we sort of stay there and we are very self-critical, judgmental, and we just can't get out of it. We're stuck. It feels like, damned if I do, damned if I don't, and you don't know how to get out of it. So by mapping it out, there's actually a place for action steps and these things we call early warning signs. So there's a way to start recognizing, hey, when am I dipping too low? When am I going into the downsides? how can I start recognizing that, being more aware for myself? And then what do I need to do to recover, to go back into that infinity loop, follow the path to the other side?
Yeah.
What do I need to do to recover? And that's what I find is powerful. It's observing without criticism and knowing where to go. It's very solution focused.
Very cool. So if somebody were to try to do it yourself,
Yeah.
I think maybe we didn't spell this out, but earlier, I think when you were talking about how you map it out and by thinking about it on paper or, just sort of making explicit something like this, it helps you really see it and see what the upside is and the downside. So do you have people sort of brainstorm? What does it look like when I'm on the upside version of side of this quadrant? What does it look like when I'm on the downside on either side? And is that what then generates that awareness because they've already thought out what are the options on either one?
Yeah. Well, just like this example, what often happens is that when we're on one side of the fence or we really value something very strongly in ourselves, we can usually only see the good intentions or the upsides of what we bring to the table. It's like, I know that I care for others and I only see that as good. Even if I overdo it and I recognize I overdo it sometimes, it's for good intentions. It's because I really care about people. So I only see myself in the upside. However, I see the opposite or the other pole. I see the other pole in the downside. So in that example that I gave, this manager, he viewed himself as I have such good intentions and I don't want to be seen as a fake. I don't want to be seen as distant. So what's happening is that he can't see the upsides. It's usually the blind spot. He can't see the upsides of actually leveraging his staff. Why would I do that? Because then it's just pulling me further and further away from staff. And until he can see, let me separate this out. There are some downsides that I don't want to become. I definitely don't want to become too distant. However, there are some good things that I can really start leveraging by tapping into my staff. And so usually we're just blind to it. Until you map it out, you don't even know it exists. Sometimes people don't even know the other pole exists. It's like, I'm just the type of person who cares about people. I'm really invested in people. And I believe that's the way you should lead and manage. And I don't even tap into the right side because I don't believe that's not my value. And so that's the power that you start recognizing, okay, there is some benefit. I don't have to live out my fear of what it's going to look like, but I can do it in a different way. So how can I scale up and stay connected? And that's where the and comes in.
Very cool. Thank you. I love it. I think that makes a lot more sense. And I hope that folks listening we'll include some extra resources in the show notes so that they can get a better sense once they park.
We'll draw it out for you. We'll draw it out for everybody.
Once you park. Or get off the treadmill or whatever it is that you're doing.
Right.
So Laura, I definitely always close out with a really specific action tip. But before that, what's energizing and exciting for you these days?
What's energizing? Let's see. I'm in the process of writing a book. Actually, two books.
Whoa.
Is quite the challenge. Right? I know, right? And it's really about some key polarities around how to engage a team at work. That's the one book, and the other book is really how to apply those same leadership principles to the home.
Oh, I love it.
One is more about parenting, and one is more about the workplace.
So can I give you an unsolicited piece of advice? Only because what you just said completely brought up an example in my mind of another way.
Okay, great.
Instead of, because you think about, you have two books, because these are two different things. I'm going to throw your own advice at yourself.
Okay.
Look into, there's a book by a guy called Scott Stratton. Have you heard of him? STRA? TTEN, I think. Mm-hmm. And he had a book called Unmarketing, I want to say. He has a book. I have to look it up, and I'll include it in the show notes just in case I've just botched this, because I'm going from memory and my memory stinks. But his book was like, you turn it upside down and the first page is on both sides. So his book is written in one book, totally like your Polarity Map, Laura.
Oh my God, that's so
Is that
cool.
amazing? So his
That
whole
is
book is
so cool.
produced so that half of it is written in completely the opposite page layout as the other.
I love it.
Isn't it cool?
That is so neat. Oh, wow. Okay. You just got me going on a whole different direction. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Anyway, that was
Yeah.
totally not you. Like I'm like stealing the thunder from you talking about
No,
what's
I love
exciting,
it.
but the idea just came. Poof. It's
That's
connecting.
great.
I love connecting
That is
ideas
great.
and people, so that just happens to me.
Yeah.
All right. And so you're writing 2 books. That's a lot of work. I love it.
Yeah. And, I mean, I love that concept too, because I think so many of us, if I think about applying that concept of the different pages, flipping it upside down, so many of us just separate ourselves at home from work.
Yeah.
And I know I was never really like that. I was never really so strict. I felt like I pretty much showed up the same in both domains. But I will say, when I started working through those leadership challenges with my son, or the parenting challenges with my son, that's when it became like so crystal clear of how much I can really apply to both. And it's almost like picking the book up and turning it in a new perspective. Like that's what I'm thinking when you're talking about that book.
Yeah.
And it's like, by the way, everything that's happening in your home life leaks out at work, and you're really just working on yourself as a whole person. So I love that. Yeah. So you got me down this creative path now. I'll let you know what comes of it. Maybe it will be one book. We'll see.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, I love it.
Look forward to seeing and hearing more about it. So give us one specific action that listeners can take today, tomorrow, this week to help ratchet up their own leadership effectiveness, especially given this perspective that we've just shared.
I was thinking about this, and I know people love tools and something really concrete to walk away with. I think a lot of the power behind polarities is to view situations differently. And I think even at the most basic level, when you can think of issues or problems that you're really struggling with, and you're thinking, I don't know, it's either this or that, think of the situation instead using and. And reframe it so the both sides are neutral, instead of you're looking at the upside of your point of view and the downside of the other point of view. See if you can understand what would the upsides of both look like, and replace or with and see what possibilities come up for you. The more you practice it with yourself in your own situations, the more that you'll see it, when problems are presented in meetings, perhaps, or even at home, or with other people when you're doing performance reviews. You'll start seeing strengths overused, and then to think about what's the other pair? What else is going on in this system? So I think like the one action, the most basic one, is start to think about problems. We say, is it a problem to solve or a polarity to manage? And so really think about, is this just a problem? Is it an either or? Sometimes it is a really basic either or problem that you can just handle. Or are you really getting stuck and you see it over and over again? Then it's probably a polarity. And so pause there and say, what would the and solution look like? What would both upsides look like? So that's what I would challenge your listeners to be thinking about.
Very cool. Thank you. And that creates a lot more self-awareness, which of course is the first step to change. It's not sufficient, but it's required. All right. So how can people keep in touch with you, learn more from you and about you, Laura?
The best way is actually just to visit the website, mendelowconsulting.com, MENDELOW consulting.com. And, one of the things that we're doing is we have monthly reviews of the latest leadership book that's out there. We call that In the Know. We want people to be in the know on the latest and greatest. And so on the website, you can sign up. It's totally free. And we meet in person in the DC area, but then we also send out summary of the discussion and the notes. We really incorporate a lot of the polarity concepts as well into those discussions.
Very cool. I didn't even know you did that. The way that we met is through a book discussion club that you organized for an association that we both belong to.
I forgot. That's how we met. That is so funny. Yeah,
love it.
so I love hearing about new concepts. Radical Candor is the next book that we're going to be covering,
Oh,
and so Intelligent Disobedience was another book, and so
Ira
just
Shalev.
so a lot of
Episode
the
15 of the Talent Grow Show.
awesome.
Yes.
And so a lot of the polarity concepts come up, and I love highlighting that in the discussions as well.
Oh, wonderful. Good.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that people do sign up and stay in touch with you because you're a smart and interesting lady. And I appreciate that you spent some time with us today, sharing with us about your work and about polarity thinking. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
What did I tell you, right? She's smart and funny and fun. So I love talking to Laura always. So I was really glad that she agreed to come on the show and talk about this really complex thing called polarity thinking. And I hope that you enjoyed this concept and that you will take value and, of course, take action, as she suggested, start thinking this way about more of what you're facing each day. I think that that will really add a lot of benefit to you. And of course, stay in touch with Laura and join her list. I think I get those emails and they are always really actionable and interesting. By the way, speaking of emails and actionable and interesting, are you getting my weekly newsletter? Because wouldn't it be cool if every time a new podcast episode came out, you wouldn't have to think about it, you wouldn't have to remember it, it just would land right in your inbox, ready for you to play. And that's what my weekly newsletter will do. It always will keep you abreast of the new content I'm creating, plus tips and actionable ideas. And it's always short, a little bit informal, and fun. So I hope that you'll join. By the way, if you join, you get a free tool called The 10 Mistakes That Leaders Make and How to Avoid Them. And we don't want you making those mistakes. So you got to download that. All right. It's all free. It's all on the show notes page, which is talentgrow.com/podcast/episode 73. And I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at TalentGrow. And I thank you for listening. And until the next time, make today great.
Thanks for listening to the TalentGrow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.